It's the Wolf Media Festival podcast. Today's guests: script and screenplay writer Jake Briggs. And now, here's your hosts, Kyle Hollingsworth, Richard Wilmore, and Jack Quellen Wolfhart.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Wolf Media Festival podcast. I'm doing solo today due to scheduling issues. So hopefully I will not be too annoying. Today we are with of the 2025 winners. We have our first interview of the year. So I have today Jake Briggs, who wrote a script called Union.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He won in the best drama category. And if I remember right on the notes that we got about it, there was like potentially 3 different categories they were debating to have him win in. Because at our festival, you just submit and we pick your category. So they were like, this one, or this one. And I'm like, dang, good for him. Like 3 categories. So I'm going to jump in. Jacob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So your script. So I have the privilege of getting to read, although I don't have the privilege of getting to judge. I'm a tiebreaker judge is all I get to judge. If there's like a tie but amongst people, then that's when my scoring gets to come in. And I rarely have to do that. I've never had to do that on a script yet. So I did get to read your script though. And it's kind of very brave of you to write another script that is apocalyptic, slightly zombie-ish. So tell me, what was your thought process on First, let's talk about what your script is, and then we'll get to that question so people know what your script is.
Yeah, so Union is, I guess I would describe it as kind of a post-apocalyptic story. A big inspiration for me was, growing up, I was actually never really into the horror scene that much. My entire family would be watching The Walking Dead, and it'd be like right before bedtime, and I'm like, I don't want to have nightmares. So I was always kind of very hesitant of the genre, but kind of a big inspiration of this story was to tackle, because I think something really interesting about like apocalyptic stories is the world building. And, I guess a big thing in zombie media specifically is how people are worse than the undead. And so a big kind of what if for me was, what if you would have set a zombie story kind of after everything has happened, or at least after the undead have really gone away, and you're just left with kind of the people who have done the things to survive that you have. And that was kind of a big inspiration for me, as well as in the past, I've mainly been a comedy writer, and I've wanted to get into dramatic comedy, and I felt that I've done a lot of comedy. I want to now focus on a full dramatic piece. But I guess something that kind of kept me going through Union was the kind of costume of the main character. It's this very absurd getup with this big Union Jack blanket he wears over himself with like a white cowboy hat. And for me, there was this balance between how do I make someone who has this very absurd and unique look to them, be as human as possible, and really tackle the mindset of who someone in that attire, of someone wearing that type of attire think, who they would be. And I guess that kind of expands to a lot of the other characters. I guess one final note is that I think for me, this piece was very much a character study, and to try to tackle these different ideas that I had about the world, and then kind of pitting them against each other and seeing what would happen. And so I guess, a big part of the story for me was finding out who these people are, because for me, I felt the world was really interesting. And the more I thought about it, the more I had these ideas of, I think a character would think this about this, or I think that they would be able to have phones and MP3 players at this point, so I can include a song and have kind of this unique moment in a post-apocalyptic story where you open up and you don't know that's an apocalypse, and it just is kind of a normal, if not strange, room that you're in with this main character.
Yeah, yeah. I really loved it because, so I don't know if you know, and people listening who follow us are probably sick of me saying this, but I am a psychologist in my real life. So I find like character development super fascinating. I love watching it grow. An apocalyptic situation is like the most raw you can get for understanding a human's brain and every action they're about to take and why they're going to take it and where, how they're developing and why they're developing that way. We live in like to us, this is a normal world. So we kind of like bypass why people might be the way they are. But when you're coming in from the outside and seeing that their world has been reframed for them, it's so much easier to learn about why their brain is doing what they're doing or whatever. So I love this idea of not just a post-apocalyptic, not just apocalyptic, but like after the post-apocalyptic. I love that concept because now we're back to they've already developed into this new person that they are. And how do they function in a normal world or getting back into a normal world at that point? It's such a brilliant idea. Was that your original concept or did you have people feeding you into that, like giving you ideas for that?
Yeah, it came about 2 years ago. It was the second half of my freshman year, and right at the start of the semester, I got sick, and so I was just at home, kind of, lounging around doing nothing, and I actually it started with the Union Jack blanket and the costume of the main character because I had a Union Jack blanket and a cowboy hat, and I was thinking about oh, maybe I can do some comedy about like a British cowboy or something. And then eventually, while I was sick, I ended up finally watching The Walking Dead. Just because my family had been big fans of it, growing up, and I was like, this seems like an appropriate time to sit down and watch the full thing. And kind of what stemmed from that is the idea of I became very interested in the zombie genre or the subgenre of horror just because going back to the idea of the core theme of humans being more dangerous than the undead. I think it's a great genre for commentary and for just general explorations of how we think and kind of how people change over time. And eventually, over the course of the semester, I'd gotten about the first 30 pages or so written. They were much rougher versions than what's in the final draft. But I started to think a lot more about these characters. And I think by the end of my freshman year, I'd already kind of figured out like the big beats and the plot points and stuff. And over the course of what would be the next 2 years leading up to when I actually sat down and finished it, I would have like a notes app where I would just put ideas that would come into my head, like, oh, I think this could be a interesting set piece or an interesting scene for these characters. But I think a lot of it stemmed from just that original idea of, this absurd character in a world. And then I guess, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but going
you're good.
Going on to the world itself, my college, Vassar College, has a very kind of old architectural style, and the front gate in particular is almost like this castle front. And what got me thinking is, I think this would be a really cool location for like a zombie story, just because there can be so much fortification and there'd be so much room to like live in stuff. And then what I started thinking there was like, I just became so fascinated in the idea that if you could reestablish, order and kind of the old world in a self-contained space, what would come out of that? And I think in tandem with the costume, the location, as well as just kind of having a lot of time to think over it and think about different plot beats, I think those kind of all came together to help me come up with what's finally on the page.
Yeah. Did anybody inspire, like anybody from your real life inspire the characters in your script?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for a lot of the characters I had kind of personal inspiration. Mainly, I would say the lead character, Union or Robert, I very much based it off of kind of my thought process of like how can you do as much good as possible, or like, you know, kind of be this kind soul in a world after everything. And from there, a lot of the difficulties I faced when writing of like, oh, well, this is a kind of a strong counter argument to his ideology. It became a strong counter argument to like how I would think. And then that gave me a lot of room to kind of shape his character and what he goes through, as well as his sister, Elise, is roughly based on my own sister, though a lot more exaggerated and taken to an extreme of this idea of doing, I guess, the absolute, or I guess his methodology of trying to find the line. And I don't know how to fully put into words kind of how everything came to be with Robert and Elise. I mean, I think the biggest inspiration from the characters, or from my real life that went into the characters, was actually their names. I named them after my middle name and my sister's middle name, which are family names as well, which typically in scripts I'm very bad at like giving characters names that like have like some deeper meaning, like, oh, in like Greek it means like noble or something. So a lot of the time I resort to like, you know, just like looking up like a name of looking up a bunch of randomly generated names and being like, oh, that sounds nice, let me put that down.
Yeah.
But now I've kind of moved on to pulling into more family names, just because I think it's nice to, you know, be able to have something as a you know, a memory of someone, or just a piece of them being attached to the story in a very subtle and non-intrusive way, right. As well as just, you know, it helps giving your characters a name before you start to plot everything out about them. But yeah, I mean, I guess every other character, I think, aside from Union and Elise, I think it really stemmed from, I guess, counter arguments against their philosophies, as opposed to people that I think I've probably met people with you know, similar mindsets to people like Nicole or Wallace, but I think they've kind of, it's been an amalgamation of different people I've met throughout life that have kind of formed into these characters.
Nice. Now, in your script too, unless I'm just not remembering correctly, you never actually brought up how the apocalypse took place, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you also don't really talk about how they got to even the point in the story where we're at of the post apocalypse. We just kind of are coming in where they found each other again, where the brother and sister found each other again, is kind of where the story in his society and her coming in kind of disrupting that, which is good and bad. And so that's where we're coming at in this story. So this is planned on to be a series. Do you know how you're going to bring up that the zombies occurred, or how they got overrun, or anything like that? Do you have that all planned out, or are you just going to try to stretch it out as much as you can?
I mean, for me, I think originally when I wrote it, I mean, a part of me didn't want to explore it just because I think there's something nice about, you know, an audience coming into a zombie story, they can get kind of a general idea of what's happened, or at least they have some background into thinking like, oh, this is probably what happened, and getting into kind of those discussions about what they think. But also for me, I found it kind of nice to leave it as something unexplained, because I think in the story, it benefits a lot from the fact of this could have been caused by a multitude of things. And it's very ambiguous about how exactly everything came to be. Because I think the important thing is how it is now, and how everything has kind of settled after the whole aftermath.
Right.
I think as well, like for the background of the characters themselves, I have rough ideas of like where I think, like how I think these characters have gone through certain things. Like there's a past between Wallace and Union that's alluded to and is given a little bit more fleshing out near the end of the piece, or near the later half. That I have a rough idea of, but I think there's something, I guess, novel about having these little pieces in there that I think if they weren't included, I think the story would still work and would a lot of the beats would still hit the same. But I think by including them, there's, I guess, a deeper layer, and this past that's shared between all the characters that doesn't have to be heavily shown through like flashback, because that's something I also want to avoid, particularly with Elise when she's giving a monologue about something that's happened, because I think I've always wanted to keep these characters kind of in the present, and I guess by kind of having the past be this very vague thing and having only these loose fragments of it, I think it's nice to be able to have this story that I think benefits from the vagueness, rather than is dampened by it. But I do have general ideas of what's come before, as well as what might come after this story. Yeah.
So is your plan, or is your hope and goal that this does get picked up and turned into a film? Or was it just more like it's a writing project, you want to get judged on your writing? I
mean, when I was originally writing it, I wrote it very much in a mindset of like, I would love to produce this. And I wrote it in a similar style that I've written like previous short film screenplays, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna make this, so let me say there's a cut here, and then we follow this person here. It's like it was very mechanical and just like matter of fact. And so actually through writing the screenplay, I learned to be able to add more prose and to have it be a more standalone piece as something of writing. Though, I mean, my dream is to have this one day made. And I mean, a lot of the location pieces and general layout of the main location, Astra, is based off of my college campus, Vassar. So, I mean, that would be the dream, to get it made there and to be a part of it in some way possible.
Cool. Very cool. And you're still just a little tiny baby. You're only 21 years old. Are you done with school? Are you still in school?
I have one more year left. I'm in my senior year.
Nice. Okay. And are you going? What is your goal with school?
Well, I'm graduating with a film major, primarily focused on screenwriting with a economics correlate, just to help with understanding producing and financial states and everything. But I'm still very much deciding on some different paths to go. I'm very interested in working on short film projects. I've been learning. I've been also taking production classes at Vassar and doing a lot of, directing projects throughout high school and about Vassar. So I'd be interested in potentially working on some short film projects, or trying to work on doing script supervision and building my way up. on primarily writing. So a lot of it is kind of still in the air, and I'm looking at a lot of different paths and trying to figure out where I'm going to be at the end of my senior year, as well as what exactly I'm going to be wanting to do after.
So I have like so many questions because I want to go like direct away from your script into you and your other projects. But I kind of have a couple more questions about your script. So first, I'm going to go back to the script for a second. You refer to your zombie creatures as a whole new term. I won't give it away just in case it ever does get made. I won't share your term for them. But what was it like coming up with a whole new term? Because we have, Walking Dead has like 47 different terms and they never say zombie, but you didn't even use a term that I've heard on there before. We have, what's the show? There's the show out right now that I can't even think of what it's called.
The Last of Us. The
Last of Us we're watching, on the video game. And you're using a term I've never heard on there. So you came up with a whole new term for zombies, as far as I'm aware. Was that just something that came to you? Was it something you like thought about, I need a new term? Or how was it coming up with a new term for zombies?
Yeah, I mean, I think at first it was really daunting because I think, I'm thinking back like 2 years ago, I think that's when I originally came up with it. I think, at first I used a lot of placeholder stuff. So I think I was just calling it like zombie at the start of writing. But I had the idea of, if people in this story are calling it a zombie, do they know about zombie media? Because I think that's always such a interesting thing about zombie media today is there zombie media in the world of the story?
Right.
And so that's always, that creates a lot of questions, and I didn't feel like I wanted to tackle all of them by having, just calling them zombies. But I think a big part of me coming up with my term came from what the intended effect of having them in the story was. Because as I started like plotting out how do I want to depict this creature, for me, the term felt like a very natural description of it. Because I think
I agree.
it feels nice to be able to have it be something very succinct, and I guess unique, but also something that I feel really fits both, the physical description of it as well as how a lot of characters are viewing it. So it was nice to kind of luckily stumble upon that word.
It's a great word. I'm shocked that it hasn't been used before because it is such a great word, but even more great for your time frame of things, I think. So I was like kind of impressed. I'm like a whole new word that means the same thing as all these words that people have been using in various, that I thought that was pretty brilliant of you. And in your script too, they're actually not a major player in the script. We've kind of talked about how that's like secondary, but they're also, at least my interpretation is they're not really threatening. Is that because of how far gone they are, or like decayed and rot, like they have no brains at this point, or what, like, is that because of how far gone they are? Is it just a whole new type of zombie where they're not as violently threatening as other shows depict them to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my mind, I think they start out kind of the any type of zombie from media that's either very lethal or just kind of standard. And the current state is very dependent on the fact that it's been 5 years, and it's just a natural part of all life that I'm imagining a lot of these creatures. After 4 years, there's not many more being made. There's not that many people left. And so by the current state of them, I think, I guess that's also another thing with zombie media that made me think is, how do zombies stay, I guess, so healthy forever? And how do they maintain that, I guess, that dominance over the world when they are, susceptible to the same things that, normal human beings are, which is time and decay. So I think the current, the way the creatures are seen in the story is very much dependent on that idea of the time that's first started. But I think at the start of everything, they were very much a much more standard and threatening creature.
So The Walking Dead is like 47 seasons long, and they have 8,000 spin-offs and so on and so forth. But the comic books, I think, I'm a comic book nerd, so I was reading the comic book before the show ever came out. The comic book actually does a little bit better of talking about how they decay and how like different seasons are going to affect it. Like if it's freezing cold and snowing outside, you're probably safe around zombies. They're frozen, they're solid, they might be growling at you, but they're frozen, you know? So you're kind of, that's like, I always think like most people want to go to where it's hot and warm and we can grow food and stuff. But according to like Walking Dead comic books, being where it's cold all the time, you're probably the safest because they can't chase you, they can't get you, they're just frozen all the time. So I think, I don't know why in the show they didn't hit on that more, but like it sounds like you really thought about that without knowing too much about the show, without reading the comic books. You really thought about their whole processes and of like the cycle of life, I guess, beyond death. So that's again brilliant, especially you're just this young man like thinking so far beyond what would be cool on the page or what would look cool on the screen. You're kind of thinking like, how would this actually be in real life, which I think is a great move, gonna make you stand out more. This is just another, going back to talking about me, my dissertation that I tried to do, so this was 2013. I graduated with my doctorates in 2014, but in 2013 or 2012, I can't remember which, I started to write my dissertation, and I asked first if I could do a dissertation on how the cure to white matter disease was going to lead to the zombie apocalypse. And my teacher thought it was brilliant and told me, no, I cannot. But white matter disease is like what causes Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that. And they're literally making medication that will reanimate dead brain cells. And that's been, for decades, they've been working on this medication. And I'm like, that really sounds pretty apocalyptic to me, pretty zombie-like to me, of bringing back dead brain cells. So anyways, I didn't get to write it, but I'm waiting for somebody to use that in a movie at some point. Feel free to take that if you want. Use it to your advantage. So back to you. Moving on, you've mentioned that you've written other scripts and you've turned them into short films, or other people have turned them into short films?
Yeah, I've written a lot of scripts that I've directed. I mean, all throughout high school, I've been working on like short films that I've made with my friends who I've asked to be actors before, and I think over the course of like from high school to now, I've probably made 30 or so. I mean, they range in how much they're quote unquote films.
Right.
But a lot of it has been, I mean, at the start, it's been, I think because of, the tools I had and stuff, I think comedy was probably like, it was one of the easier things to make with a lower budget. So I've done a lot of comedy films. I've done a parody of like student films. I made I quote unquote like stop motion comedy film about there being this like comedy cult that's like trying to remove all the laughter in the world. And so a lot of my my projects up until now have been very comedy based. And I one of the things that really got me into writing was I love writing jokes, and I love like clever wordplay. And that was actually something that made Union really difficult at times. Was just like not being able to really put a joke in there. And I like there's times at which there are, I guess, funny moments, but they're very few and throughout the piece.
So are your other films anywhere that people can watch? Are they on YouTube? Are they out on Vimeo or any Vimeo? What is it called? Vimeo, right? Vimeo. Are they where people can watch them, or they're all secret hidden away?
Most of them are on my my YouTube channel. It just called Jake Briggs. And most of them are up there from all the way back in like junior year of high school until now. They range in quality from to it exists.
Yeah.
So,
but that's great. That's great that you're putting them out there still. And it's like documenting your improvements over the years and all that stuff. So that's great. I think that's wonderful that you're not like hiding them from people. That's great. I think that's great.
Yeah, I all throughout high school and the vast majority, I've loved making these projects. And I think there's only like a couple that I have like unlisted, just because I was like, I think quality wise, these are just like, the thing I get upset about with like some of my earlier project is just like the quality. I'm like, I could, like, the edit here is terrible. Like I could, like, there's an overlapping frame. I could fix that so easily now. But I mean, I have my, I guess, quote unquote, senior thesis project from high school up, and then a bunch of other ones. And it's always nice to, especially in like, my friend group, sometimes we watch them and we look back on them and stuff. And it's a nice, documentation of not only kind of what I've learned as like a filmmaker and a writer, but also just kind of getting to flash back to that time when getting to like remember all those moments when we're setting up the camera and we just can't stop laughing and we have to like try to like serious up for a take.
Right. I love that. I love that so much. Sorry, but that's adorable. I don't mean that like as an insult, but that's adorable. And I love that. So do you try to use the same friends over and over? Do you ever branch outside of your friends to use people in your films? Or like, since you're in film school, I'd imagine you have a lot of people willing to participate, or you're just like, too bad, I'm sticking to my friends.
Yeah. I mean, I've moved on to now working with, actors at my college and stuff. I mean, a lot of my earlier films with friends from high school who didn't have much acting experience. But a lot of my more recent projects are, I've done a couple for class. And a lot of that was like, finding people that are my friends who I know from, different acting groups. And I've actually kind of built a group of friends at my college who are part of the acting groups, who do act in my film project. So it's nice to be able to have that, that same rapport with my actors while still, they're incredibly dedicated and, they mock up their scripts before they come onto set, and they ask me questions about the characters. And it's such a, it's a weird experience to go from like, kind of just like stumbling over my words and being like, okay, so you're going to say this line, and then giving them like a script to look over for like 3 minutes to like get the one line, of having people like be able to fully recite whole monologues. It's just such a, it's a very different experience. But getting to kind of know the people that I'm working with, I think that's been a constant. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Do you want to be, if you could only pick one, would you rather be a director or a writer? I mean, if I had to choose between the two, I would say I would want to be a writer, because I love, I love directing and being able to bring my, projects to life. But a large reason that I ended up learning production and kind of sought that out was because I loved writing. And, even back in, middle school, I would be, doing a lot of prose writing and writing a lot of stories like that. And I think it was kind of that draw to kind of get my stuff seen, because I've always been interested in film. But I think it's a lot easier to like ask your friends, so like, hey, watch this, short film that I made, compared to asking them to like read like 5 pages of something, when back then,
people
Yeah.
didn't even want to read like the stuff being assigned to them. So I think it
You
was
don't have to. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think plus a lot of people don't realize, especially low budget to even maybe mid budget, I'm sure all budgets, being a director is a lot of freaking work, but especially when you're a lower budget film because you don't have showrunners and script runners and all those other jobs are now the director's jobs. And it's not just about like directing the scene, but it's literally like a 24-hour job for however many days, months, weeks that you're shooting. It's a big job. So I think I would have picked a writer as well because it's a lot of work also, but it's the fun, like the only you get to be creative side and you don't have to like be mean to anybody when you're writing. So that's the more fun, hard job, I think for sure. So this Union was a project you were getting graded on at school or no?
Yes. It was for a screenwriting class that I just did last semester, and we were graded on like the writing of it, but the main focus of the class was kind of creating the full screenplay, workshopping it, and the screenplay was graded, but the main grade came from like the workshopping and reviewing everyone else's work. So it was a nice environment to be pushed to get the pages out and to like just get stuff down on the page, because there was a lot of stuff in like my first draft that I ended up cutting. A whole like character relationship was added only in like the final draft of the story. So there's a lot that's changed with the story over time, but it was nice to be in an environment where I was both pushed to get the pages out, as well as not having this like huge burden on my back of I need these pages to be the most exceptional thing ever. Instead, I just need to have these pages and then make them good.
Yeah. And did they give you like any sort of parameters on what you had to write about? Like stick within this genre, stick within this topic, or what was the dynamic of deciding to go this route with a graded project?
Yeah. I mean, for the class, the main project was write a screenplay, and it could be any genre. And it had to be.
You chose not to do comedy. That's so interesting.
A core kind of structure of the class is in the fall semester, you would write the first 30 pages as well as like do some outlining for what's going to come later. And then the spring semester, you would write the final 60 or so pages and then workshop that. However, when I was abroad, I ended up doing a alternative screenwriting class, and it was much more geared around writing a short film of about 20 to 30 pages. And so I ended up working on something completely different. And so when the winter break came around, we had to have the first 30 pages or so done of with the screenplay we wanted to work on. And as I was like trying to come up with ideas like, maybe I should do this story that I have kind of that I'm thinking about, or maybe I should like expand on this. I kind of look back and see what I had like story wise. And I came back onto Union because at this point I probably hadn't touched it in like a year or so. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, well, I want to get out of this screenwriting class kind of the ability to eventually write a dramatic comedy. And I think a big part of now getting to that point is learning how to write a drama and really write something where I'm not going to be using comedy as a crutch, because I feel like I sometimes often do that. And so a lot of things just align for Union to be kind of the piece that it was both the easiest to submit like, okay, let me do some updates on it and then submit the 30 pages so that I don't have I'm not super burdened over the holiday season. But also it was the piece that I felt was going to be the best for me to kind of learn from. And I very much did learn from it, because I think it probably would have been easier just to write the 30 pages of a comedy and then work on a comedy the rest of the semester, compared to trying to finish Union, because I feel like that was probably one of the most difficult processes I went through trying to write a story. But I'm exceptionally happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, it came out great, and you grew as a writer. I'm kind of wondering, like, a lot of times comedians tend to be the best dramatic actors. Do you feel like this is your best work? Like, you as a comedic writer, your best work happens to be this is more than a drama, though. This is like, I don't even know what to call it. It's like, it's more than it's like a fantasy societal post-apocalyptic drama. So do you feel like because you're a comedy writer, it actually aided you in writing a drama, or do you think it really just like tore you apart as a person?
I mean, I think parts of being a comedy writer definitely helped. I feel by understanding like kind of timing and general, general timing of comedy, I feel like that helped me a lot with some of the more, I'm trying to find the word, I guess some of the more action sequences, in which, there's kind of this lack of dialogue and it's fully related on like the actions. I think also in my screenplay, I have a good amount of particular camera movements and cuts mentioned. I think I use a couple I forget how many or so, but I often use match cuts a lot because coming from comedy, I've always loved match cuts as like a technique to tell a joke. But by kind of understanding what makes a match cut funny, I was able to then say, oh, I think this would actually be really useful in kind of creating this idea of compacted time where everything is, day after day, everything is kind of the same.
Yeah.
A lot of comedic techniques and just being in comedy have helped me with a lot of the more, I guess, elements that you don't really see within the narrative itself, more like through the techniques. But I would say, coming from a comedic background, it was a challenge kind of shifting my mindset to tone and making sure that certain dramatic beats are landing right. Because I mean, up until this point, I haven't really written something that's, that gets at least this intense and really explores concepts this thoroughly. So that was kind of, I think that's a challenge for any writer to like do that for the first time. And I think being primarily comedic writer didn't necessarily help with that. But yeah, so I think there's a balance there.
Yeah. Do you have anybody who's like inspiration for you? I know a lot of people will come on here and talk about like this actor is my inspiration or, something along those lines, but we never really hear beyond actors. Was it only actors for you who are inspirational in your writing, or is there specific writers for you that are inspirational, directors, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my inspirations, I think, are actually directors. I mean, my favorite director of all time is Edgar Wright, who did Shaun of the Dead and the Cornetto trilogy, and a film that I think really helped. It's kind of like the pinnacle of what I want to do as a dramatic comedy is this film, The World's End. And for me, that's always been a story that I love the balance of drama and comedy in it. It's an exceptionally powerful film, but it's also has some incredible jokes in it. And for me, I think that's his writing style and especially his cinematography and the very poignant choices he makes. I think that's always been a big inspiration. But I would say I've actually gotten a lot of inspiration from some more independent or lesser known filmmakers. there's this one director who actually he recently made a very big film going around in film circles called Mike Cheswick, and for a film called Hundreds of Beavers, which has been doing numbers on Letterboxd, and I've been a fan of since his other film Lake Michigan Monster, and both films are very I guess atypical. Lake Michigan Monster is a very lower budget film, but has exceptionally well comedic timing, and manages to like keep me invested in these absurd characters. And I really like not only the stories of the films themselves, but getting to watch these filmmakers go about the process and really, get to see them kind of create. So I think that's kind of one of my biggest inspirations.
Cool. No, I love to hear. That's one of my goals with this festival, is to find these like little guys, unheard of guys, and get them out there more, because these lesser known people have such cool things going on and such cool things to share that they can inspire so many other people. They're just not known enough. And that's one of the whole reasons we have our festival, is to help bring light to people like this, or people like you in particular. I really hope to see your script like become something and people get to watch it, or even just get to read it someday, because it's so great in so many different levels, a unique twist on a classic, situation, written by such a young person. And it is really, truly amazing. What is your next step in life?
Well, I mean, I'm working on a couple projects. I'm in the middle of producing a one-act play that I wrote abroad through my college for a festival in Manhattan later this month. So that's kind of been what this whole month is devoted to the rehearsal process and getting the costumes and all that ready. So that's kind of the next big thing. And then I have some PA work on a film, What May Be. So I'm really excited for that. But my senior year is going to be a lot working on my next feature screenplay, as well as producing a funded short film that I get to write and then hopefully direct my final semester. So I'm really excited for that.
That's so awesome. Oh my gosh, you've got so much like going on for you already. That is awesome. I really hope to see like some film in theaters someday. Be like, I interviewed the director of this film. I interviewed the writer of this project, or, I see that for you. It's so great. You already have so many things going on. So I will put your YouTube link in my own show notes so people can come check you out. Jake Briggs, everybody. Thanks so much.
Wolf Media Festival Podcast with Kyle Hollingsworth, Richard Wilmore, and Jacqueline Wolfhart. Produced and edited by me. I'm Jacqueline Wolfhart. Don't forget to check out the links in the description to find ways you can connect with our guests. Thanks for checking us out today and tuning in every week wherever you get your podcasts.